So the next ability we're going to discuss, and the last of the sense-based abilities, is called Clairtactilus. Someone who actively uses the ability would be called a Clairtactilant. The category the ability falls under is sense-based abilities. The primary manifestations are feeling, not to be confused with emotion feeling, tactile ability. That's what Clairtactilus is all about. I'll explain more in a second. The definition of the word, again, is always two: clair, meaning beyond, and tactilus, which of course, as I just sort of said, relates to tactile ability, which of course is the sense of touch. Now, the biggest thing, of course, is that most people, when they think of things like feelings, they tend to mean more insights, ideas, emotions than touch. So that can be a bit of a problem because, of course, this is feeling more than an insight is a feeling. So when we're using some of those words, you kind of have to focus a little bit and see in what context, because of course that dictates, right? If I get an insight or an impression, it has absolutely nothing to do with Clairtactilus. But if I say I get a feeling, it's going to take a moment to kind of think, okay, in which context are we talking about? So with Clairtactilus, it is all about feeling. Now, one of the hard things for people to realize in that is that that itself includes a tremendous amount of things. Like we said before when we were looking at the clairaudient, there's that ability with like the boom, right? The bass that we can feel, that pressure wave. That is a clairtactile sense, right? That's Clairtactilus being used in the psychic variation on that, right? So Clairtactilus actually covers a tremendously broad spectrum, but it always includes skin in some form, right? Pressure, heat, tingles, all of those things. The ability to even feel like if I'm putting my hand over something and I feel heat or cold, that's a tactile type ability. So the psychic variation on it would be Clairtactilus, right? So it's an ability that we use quite readily, but may not really give it the credit that it deserves. Like, perfect example, right? The sense of heat. Like, even if I'm sort of drinking a hot liquid, the heat of it, that's a tactile sense, even though it's using sense of taste at that time. The taste is taste, the heat itself is more tactile. Same thing, right? If we go out and we feel the cold wind blowing, that's of course flesh, that's skin, it's a tactile sense, right? So Clairtactilus, of course, is an ability that covers a tremendous range of things. It's probably next to intuition and some of those kind of abilities, the broadest category of ability, because it just includes so much, right? Even the sense of pain, of, like I said, pressure, of pinpricks, of, felt like somebody pulled your hair out. Those are all tactile type senses, right? So of course, as soon as we go beyond, then we're hitting Clairtactilus. Now, this is important because that opens up a lot of doors. One of the most common things with Clairtactilus is the sense of maybe someone sort of putting their hand on your shoulder. That itself can be an awfully reassuring thing. It can be an awfully liberating one, right? It just sort of makes us feel like we're safe and there's someone there, right? And that too is where a lot of people get some of the ideas of ghosts from. Not saying that ghosts are real, and I'm not saying they're not. I'm just saying that a lot of the ideas that we get can be attributed to other things, and a lot of things like that can simply be Clairtactilus that we're taking as something else, right? Like looking at things that we normally associate with ghosts, right? Walk into a room and the temperature drops. That's a Clairtactilus ability, right? If there's no physical change in temperature, it has nothing to do with anything else. That's pure Clairtactilus. And like everything else, there's a meaning behind it. It could be that, of course, it's a ghost, if there are such things. I'm not going to spoil it. It could be that it's just that, you're feeling cold for some other reason. It could be that you're not protected, right? We feel cold when something out there. Like when we're watching a scary movie or, something like a slasher film and someone's about to die, we feel cold for a moment, right? Well, that sensation has a meaning for us. And of course, like everything else, we're trying to interpret. And Clairtactilus, like the other sense-based abilities, is about information in the end, right? We're using those senses to teach us something. And tactile ability is no different. It's just that because it has such a broad spectrum, right? And the hard part is to distinguish like all the others, right? If I feel a cramp in my foot, is it because I have a cramp in my foot, or is it because they're trying to teach me that I'm just not walking enough, that I need to go for a walk, that I need exercise, right? If I'm feeling just burnt out, like I'm just drained of energy, is it because I'm drained of energy, or is it because I'm just spending too much of myself doing whatever? Am I just overworking myself, right? So Clairtactilus is a very subtle ability in a lot of ways because it comes in that way. And unfortunately, it's probably the single greatest ability to discount the impressions because we can put too many things, right? Like looking at things like fibromyalgia, right? Some people, that is, of course, a very legitimate medical condition. For others, there's no physical component to it. It's a Clairtactilus sense kicking in, trying to teach something, trying to show us something, right? And the two, unfortunately, are very hard to distinguish. So a lot of people will assume that it's one when it's the other. And just like the physical side, it doesn't mean it's just going to go flash and then flash away. The whole point behind a lot of those senses is to teach us, right? With vision, because there's a lot of greater span of visions that we could use, we might get one flash once that means one thing and another flash something else that means something else that connects to that, right? So we can get a whole depth of different pictures. With tactile, there's only so many things we can use that have that specific meaning. So it can be that it sticks around longer because it's just giving you more time to try and learn what the meaning is. So a lot of things like aches and pains have meaning. Like looking back at some of the old wives' tales, right? People would be like, oh, my knee's aching. There's rain coming. It's going to snow, right? Well, some of that, of course, is the physical aspect that we're picking up the pressure differential that, of course, the meteorologists know how to read now, right? It could be that we're picking up something beyond. So it is a very in-depth ability because it covers that gambit. So it, unlike the others, requires a lot more time to interpret because, for one, we don't generally use that sense to learn as much. If you're blind, of course, then of course your sense of touch, the tactile ability is going to be a godsend because, of course, how do you read? Everything's in Braille. Everything is a tactile sense. Now, on that note, if say someone who is blind or someone who can read Braille gets the feeling of Braille on their fingertips, that is a Clairtactilus ability, right? You're using the sense of touch. And that's it in a nutshell, right? So again, all of those things connect. Anything that deals with sensation of any body part that uses flesh in any way, pain, tingles, heat, cold, all of it is all Clairtactilus. So it does require a lot more understanding than any of the other abilities just because of the depth of it. But that's Clairtactilus. Now, of course, because of its limitations in use, it's not as easy to develop as some of the others, and that puts a bit of restriction on it, but it can be used in a lot of great ways. So as we go on to developing the ability, to showing you how to use it, we'll give you tools to help develop even Clairtactilus. But you'll notice real quick that there's just not as much that we can use. The best thing that you can use to develop Clairtactilus is really just trust. If you feel something, take a moment to look at it and figure out why it's there. Most of it is going to be there for a reason. Even pain is going to have a reason. It could just be that there's physical damage, and if that's what pain is, or it could be a lesson. And your job basically is to distinguish the two and figure it out. So there you go. There's the sense-based abilities in a nutshell. Hope you enjoyed them.